Does it need to be one of these?
Hello? Is it unmuted? Hello? Hello? Can you guys hear me? No? Now you can. We got a few people who are coming in the back room. There's seats up here, guys, if you want to come up here and sit in 5 or 6 seats. So, welcome. So I want to introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker tonight. My name is Carrie Briley. You might recognize that name because I worked for the Village of Orland Park for over 13 years. As the Director of Development Services, and then as the manager. I am been in the profession of local government management for over 30 years. Still am today, serving in other communities. And the reason I'm here tonight, using my voice and my expertise in education, is because I am also a resident of Orland Park and have been for almost 20 years raising my children here. And when this referendum question came forward, I thought the best person who could come and help the community and understand what that issue and answer questions and concerns is Mr. Jason Grant. Mr. Jason Grant works for ICMA, and I'm going to share with you his bio as well. Jason Grant is the Director of Advocacy at the International City Management Association, where he advances thought leadership regarding local government administration. Jason focuses primarily on the relationship between elected officials and professional staff in addressing local issues, and highlights the ways in which forms of government affect the power structure within the local government system. Prior to joining ICMA, Jason spent 16 years in local government, primarily as the Chief Communications Officer, guiding community engagement and policy development. Jason combines theoretical insights with practical experience to provide a pragmatic approach to public administration, with the belief that communities are best served through open and honest dialogue between the government and its people. His work is centered on strategies for assuring a responsive government that honors the many voices of the community. So I want to welcome Jason tonight. There are handouts, a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to turn it over. There are handouts in the back if you didn't get them. We also have signs that are available. And if you want to sign, please leave your address, your name, time, and we'll make sure they're delivered to your house. There are both ground rules for tonight. For our Orland Park residents, we love our hometown very, very much. That's why we're all here today. So we're going to be respectful. Jason can come out here and offer to come. We did not pay for him to come. We volunteered services here tonight. So we want to be respectful, and we want to be polite, and we want to be kind. Okay? Can we all agree to that? Yes. Okay. All right. And then I'm going to also ask you to hold your questions to the end so that Jason can walk through his presentation and jot down notes if you need to. And we will be here as long as we need to be here to make sure every question is answered, and any concerns that you have been addressed. If we don't have the answer, we're going to write it down, and we're going to get the answers for you as well. So welcome to that, and Jason Grant.
Right.
You don't need this. We got that.
So that I'm kind of loud sometimes. So does that come through? Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm Jason Grant. I'm with the International City and County Management Association. We have about 13,000 members globally. Our job, we are thought leaders and researchers on what is good administration of government, right, in a broad sense. And so I'm going to go through today a bit, understanding that there's a referendum coming up, just to help clarify what are some questions, what are thoughts that are out there, help you also understand how do other communities across the country deal with these types of things, what are some of the questions that we see coming up, and what are some of the things that we see that are sort of unique in Orland Park here around this referendum, and what are some things that are kind of common in these types of referenda that come up. So feel free, again, any questions that you have, let me know. If I start talking too fast, I know I speak kind of quick sometimes, I'll try to slow down. Just throw your hand up and say, whoa, slow down for me. I will slow down. As we go through, first thing, just like to talk about, because a lot of times this comes up, as a federal republic, Article 4 is a Republican form of government, so we are representative democracy, and then it comes in the 10th Amendment of our Constitution. It only grants powers to the states, right? There is no local government in our constitutions. They only exist as states allow them to exist. And as such, that's why it gets really confusing, right? Every state is different. Within states, they're different. Within a county, you'll see different types of forms of government. So people say, what the heck's going on? So there's a lot of confusion sometimes comes up around this. And it's because there is no local government structured, right? But as we look at forms of local government in the US, what you will find, and we talk about it broadly, and again, because each state determines what rights local governments can have and how they get structured, they'll call them totally different things. But what we do is have these broad categories. And within that is council manager. What you guys have right now is a council manager form of government. That is where the executive power and the legislative power rests in one body, generally referred to as a council for you all, your board, and that is inclusive of a mayor. But right, so the executive powers and the legislative powers all rest within that one body. And then they delegate authority, not the power of that branch, but authority to make decisions on administration to a manager, right? So that manager gets to carry out the day-to-day operations, but they can be fired any day because the power still rests with that one body, right? The mayor council is the other form of government. These are two most common kinds. Mayor council is what you would be going to if you end up voting to get rid of the current form of government, which is what the question is right now. Do you want to maintain it? Right? If you choose to maintain it and it's yes, you keep your council manager form. If you say, no, we want to get rid of this form of government, we don't want to maintain it, you would go to what's called a mayor council form in broad terms, right? So this township council, in broad terms, it's mayor council, which now you are separating those powers. The executive power, much like our state and federal government, executive power rests in a mayor who's no longer part of the board. The board is the legislative power, no longer has any powers over the administrative side. And then if there's any kind of manager, and I know there's been discussion of do we hire a manager, what you'll see in mayor council, this hybrid model, they'll have a manager, but they report to the mayor because the mayor is the one who's responsible for administration of government, and the board would no longer have any powers over that. They can't fire anybody for not doing a good job running the government anymore under a mayor council form. Does that kind of make sense broadly? The other forms we won't get into, you're not dealing with them. If you got questions on all of them, happy to talk to you about them. But they're all a little bit different. But these are the primary forms of government. And what you'll notice, council manager is the most common form, mayor council, second most common form. In almost any cities across the country today that are trying to figure out what do we change our form of government to, they're usually debating between some form of these two types of government. And that's exactly where you all find yourselves right now. Fair enough? Easy enough? All right. So last thing I want to say about this, to understand local government. As I already talked, there is no uniform structure, and it'll get really confusing in Illinois because, again, within the Illinois state constitution, there's a whole lot of different forms of government called different types of things, and it can get really confusing on there. There is no uniform structure in any other state to compare that to. And then if you look at local government, there's a higher degree of professionalism generally. Local government's more constrained. We all drive on the same roads. We all have the same schools. We all have the same parks. There's things that we need. We want our roads plowed. There's certain things we want, and we want to make sure that gets done well. So at the local government, you see a much higher demand for professionalism in that. You want people to know what the heck they're doing to make sure this gets done well. At the state and federal level, it starts to become more politicized or more partisan, right? So if you think of the federal level, each secretary is some sort of political appointee to run an entire division, whether or not they've ever had any experience running that type of division, right? You'll see it at the state level, and then at the local levels, that's where you start to look at, there's more expectation of professionalism at the local level, mostly because you're going to see people, and if government isn't doing what you want, and you know where to find them because you can get down to talk to them any day of the week, right? The other thing, they respond to immediate needs. The higher up you go, so the federal level is more broader and it's long-term visions, right? They're passing bills that maybe we see something in about 10 to 20 years, if we're lucky, right? So at the state level, a little bit further out. At the local level, they're usually immediate needs. We have a problem right here, right now that needs to be addressed by government, and we expect that to happen. It differs by location, and it's a child of the state. So you always got to remember, and a lot of the discussion that's here is, well, we have to do this because this is what the state allows for. If you read the Constitution of the state, you'll see there's certain things we can do and can't do. And so we have to understand every local government is a child of state. You only have those powers and authorities expressly granted by the state, right? And in this case, you all have a village charter. That charter gives you a lot of powers that operates as a constitution of the village. And then you also have the ability under a managerial form of government that you've declared, and then the state tells you how you can change that. Right? So that's sort of what we are in the midst of currently. So I deal with a lot of communities that are asking about, what do? We want a new form of government. We're not sure if the form of government is working for this. What are some challenges that we see? And when we see challenges, when people say we need to change the form of government, there's certain reasons why, and they all fall along these sort of things. One is going to be accountability. You'll always hear this debate in accountability, and I got to believe you've probably started to hear this now. Usually it sounds something like this. If you're in a council manager forum, you'll usually hear something from a mayor. Well, gee, I was elected in order to do what the people want me to do. In order to be accountable to the people, the buck has to stop with me, right? You'll hear a lot of that kind of discussion. The elected leaders like, geez, people look at me as mayor, people look at me as a board member, and I need to have the ability to make a final decision on this. It can't be this unelected person who's a manager, right? This is issue of accountability. Are we accountable to the electorate, right? So are we accountable to the majority of people who show up and vote? Or are we accountable to the people, everyone who's delivering programs and services? So they're not always the same people, right? And so how do we make sure that we're accountable? And that's usually an issue that comes up. And I'll get to how these accountability kind of goes in each form of government. But anytime there's a change in a form of government, this issue of accountability to the people, accountability to voters, generally comes up. The other thing is what's often referred to as administration politics dichotomy. This idea that there's an administration, it's the professionalism, and there's politics and policy, right? And they're totally separate. Not really that way, right? But there's this idea of a dichotomy. Really, we work together. There's always this blending. But there's always this notion of, is this a political issue? Are we doing this to try to win votes and get more popular vote into something? Or is this a professional issue? What really makes the most sense? Because sometimes what might make the most sense and the best way to do something might alienate a certain electorate. And if that electorate is alienated, that might hurt me from a political perspective. So there's always this balance we have to have. Now that said, a manager is going to make sure that they reach the goals of the elected officials. They have to, they establish the goals. There's always this blending of how is this going to work, right? So, but there's always this notion, should this chief executive officer, should that be a job? Should it be someone who has the professional knowledge, skills, and ability to do it? Or is this someone who should be voted in, right, as a democracy, right? That's sort of the question that often gets brought up. And so you often hear this issue, is it a job or is it something that should get voted in when it comes to running government? And the other one is the separation of or unified powers. So as I talked about, the council manager form of government, executive and legislative are together, and in the mayor council, they are separate. And which one is right? And again, I'll say it's always going to come down to the community. They got to decide what do they believe. Those who want separation of power, they're usually looking for expediency, right? We want the mayor separate, the executive is separate from the legislative, so the mayor can just do what they want. They're going to all this discussion. We got to go through debate. We're going to have public hearings, all this thing. Sometimes it takes too long to get done what I want to get done. So let's separate these powers, and you just move on forward under the executive branch to make the administration do what you want to do, right? Under unified power, those that say, no, we're better off together is we're more effective. We make sure we hear more voices. We want to know what's happening. We want to hear from people delivering programs and services. That debate helps us make better decisions, right? So this idea of we'll be more effective in government if we're collaborating and working together, even if it takes a little bit longer. Those are usually sort of the arguments that you'll hear for those who may want separation of power or unification of power. The other issue is a concern of corruption, right? So again, trust in government generally has been waning over the past few years. It's always been lower at the federal, a little bit better at the state, and a lot better at the local government level. But we're seeing a lot of change right now is a lot less trust in government generally. We're seeing more partisanship across the board and even at the local level. And then that sort of creates this concern of trust in government. And so this issue of trust often leads to, is it corrupt, right? Are the politicians corrupt? Are the professionals, the bureaucracy, is that corrupt? Right? There's always this concern of corruption, that people are going to do what's in their own best interest, not in the best interest of the people. And so which form of government gives us the greatest assurance that my government is doing more for the people and the community than they are for themselves? Usually a debate that you'll start to hear brought up on this. And again, if you haven't heard any of these issues yet, you will. My gut is, and I've seen some of the articles, I know some of these things have come up, but you'll hear more and more of that. These things across the country, whenever there's a form of government challenge, I find that these issues are often brought up. Does that kind of make sense? Is that fair from what you guys are seeing? Or am I like way out in left field somewhere that you guys are like, you're clueless? Is spot on? Good. Okay. So The other thing is that we get a lot is ICMA. So we support the council manager form of government. And I'll say this though, there is no good, bad in forms of government. Forms of government, there are better or worse based on what your desired goals are. We have members in every form of government, right? So we have members who are city administrators under a mayor-council form reporting directly to a mayor, right? People have the potential to do good or to do harm regardless of the form of government. So what we look at from ICMA is which gives us the best opportunity to have effective government. And what we say is effective government is it works for the people, it's more responsive to the needs, and there's better outcomes, which I'll get into some of those outcomes in a bit, which gives us the best chance for that. And that's what we look at and why we support it. Again, not because one's good and one's bad. Anybody who supports mayor council is evil. Everyone who supports council manager, they're the right people. That's not what this is about, right? There is opportunity for any community has to make a decision. The good thing that you all are going to vote is you're going to say this is what we believe is best for our community and what we think gives us the best chance to be effective as a city or a village in your case here, right? So why we look at it. One, we believe in collaborative government. We believe government operates better when the mayor, the council, and the manager and all staff work together to get things done, right? We believe there's value in a mayor. A mayor is out there. They're generally in all cities elected at large. They are there because they have a vision for the city that they believe in. And the people have bought into that vision. The council, each one of those council members ran on a vision. And the people believe that they're going to fight for them for that vision. And the mayor and the council together in one body, they have to work together. And the council manager, no one council member, in this case board member, has any more power than the other. And the mayor also doesn't have any more power than anybody else. We believe that's value because that forces you to have collaboration. If I'm the mayor and I can veto, well, now I have a little bit more power, right? Because now you need to have a supermajority to override my veto. So if you don't like what I have to say, I can veto that. I just need to get enough people to not be able to have it overridden, right? So it allows the ability for great ideas to never come to the floor. Because anybody who ever's worked with elected officials, if you know it's going to lose, you can't lose every time. Otherwise, people start to lose faith in you. You bring forward those things that you feel have a chance to maybe win, or at least the debate is worthwhile. If you know it's going to be vetoed, great ideas never make it to the floor, right? So this idea of collaboration, we believe that's important, which is why we believe in the council manager form of government. The city manager is really important here is that they bring professional expertise to help with the policies, right? The council, inclusive of the mayor, have to adopt policies for the community. But it's got to be policies that can work, right? We can have all these great ideas. If we have no idea how to carry it forward, it's not going to be effective. And a manager should bring those forward. And here's the thing. If they are unable to, they should be able to be fired at any point for failing to do the job. That's what we believe they should be held accountable to, and that's what we hold ourselves to. We are there as managers to carry out the will of the council, which is inclusive of the mayor. And we're held accountable every day for doing that effectively, and our job is based on how effective we are, not on winning an election, right? So we believe that collaborative government matters, and that council manager form, by its nature, forces collaboration. Mayor, council, cities can operate this way. They have the potential to, but it's not baked into the system of how it is. They also have the potential to choose. If the mayor has a total different idea than the council, then the mayor can slow play this great idea that the council just adopted. Yeah, I'm gonna get right on that thing. Probably not gonna get right on that thing because I didn't run on that. And I gotta win elections, so it really doesn't matter if I carry out your will as a council or as a board, because you as a board aren't the ones that get me reelected, right? That is also a potential in the mayor council form, which doesn't exist in the council manager, right? They have to create a majority on the board to move ideas forward. Does that make sense? Is that? Okay. So the other thing I like to go through is sort of how it works, because a lot of people get confused on this. A lot of people, when we talk about form of government, what often happens is they equate a mayor chief executive to a manager chief executive, that they're the same exact thing, one just gets elected and one doesn't. Not the case. Totally different positions in a lot of ways. A lot of shared authority, but totally different positions. So the way that it works, the majority vote of the council, they can choose a definite or indefinite amount of time. They could choose whether they want to do a contract, a 1-year contract, 2-year contract, however they want to do that with the manager. The council, the board in this case, makes that decision. They can fire them with a simple majority vote. If the majority of the board feels that the city manager is failing to do their job, village manager just stinks, is no good at what they do, they can fire them any meeting, call closed session on a personnel matter, they'll have the personnel matter discussion. If the majority of the board says, yep, we need to get rid of them, they're gone. That's simple, right? Now, if they have contracts that they laid up and how they set up that contract, there may be certain costs that they have to pay because they set that contract up, but they have the ability to do that, right? That's their power to figure out how they're going to hire them and any kind of severance that's there as well. And the appointment of the city manager, the village manager, is based on the professional experience, right? So if we want to make sure we have good financial policies, want to do redevelopment, I might hire, so we got a redevelopment opportunity, I might hire someone who really has experience and they demonstrate that experience in redevelopment, right? Whatever the issues are, that board can sit down and say, this is what a good village manager should look like for us, and they hire him based on that. A mayor, not the case. A mayor can run a good election. They may not be able to know how to run a village, right? So they're different in how they get into that position. In terms of hiring staff, a mayor and a mayor council form can hire anybody they wish for any reason they wish. There's nothing that binds it. Each department head is an at-will employee to the mayor under a mayor-council structure. So what you will see often in mayor-council cities, good mayors will hire people based on their experience. It's not required. Some mayors will hire people because they gave good campaign contributions, for example, and nothing can stop that, right? So there's nothing that requires them to hire based on skills and ability, though good mayors would choose to do so, but it's not required in the form of government. Under the council manager form of government, you have to hire based on skills and ability, right? You got HR processes you have to go through, they have resumes they have to go through, and if they're not, that's a reason to hold that person accountable, and you could fire that manager for not hiring qualified people into department heads. Those department heads get hired and fired by the administrator, not the elected body. And that really frustrates sometimes some boards. Any one person on that board may have a real problem with this one department head. I don't like that they didn't approve this zoned property that I really wanted to get zoned. And they didn't really help move it forward. But they don't have a majority of their own board in agreement with them, right? So again, sometimes you have a mayor, the mayor could choose to fire that person if they don't do that. And having members who work in that, sometimes that really happens. Like, look, you need to do this if you have a city administrator under a mayor council form. If the mayor wants something to happen and that administrator doesn't do it, they can fire that administrator even if they can't fire the department heads in that structure, right? But generally, all department heads, including the administrator under mayor council, works directly for the mayor. And they change every 4 years with any new mayor that comes in, right? So your senior leadership will change with the election cycle of a mayor. Under the council manager form, you have more continuity because those managers, those department heads get fired because, again, same thing. If they're not doing a good job, that's what you have to prove in order to fire those people, right? Make sense? Is that fair? Yeah. Last one is the budget process. A lot of people believe that a city manager sits down and makes up whatever budget they want, and they just give that to the board, and the board just adopts whatever the city manager has. Not the way it works. Been through a lot of budget processes. What actually happens, the city manager, it should look like it's a rubber stamp if they do it right. I don't mean that in a negative way. There shouldn't be a whole lot of debate when that budget gets presented because the manager should have been talking to all the board members, should have been talking to the mayor, should have been having a lot of conversation. That board has already adopted what their vision, what their long-range plan, if there's a strategic plan, what that is, what the land use long-term is going to be, all these things that the board has adopted, all the resolutions they've passed. A good manager is going to say, okay, you passed all these things. This is what you want. From a budget, here's what it's going to take to get there. Now, when they see that, they have under council manager, they could say, no, I want to change any part of this. As a board, they can change any and all of that budget. And the manager would be like, man, I really wish you didn't change that. I don't agree with you. I think it should be this. And they say, no, this is what we're adopting. City manager has to be like, okay, I got to fully execute that to the best of my ability, even if I don't agree with the decision you made, which is not the case under mayor council. Mayor can be like, you adopted that budget, okay. These are my priorities. These are the ones I'm really going to spend attention on. Your other priorities I may or may not, right? So again, when we look at that budget, the budget process is a recommendation from a manager to the elected body to say, here's what I think it's going to take for you to accomplish the goals that you, board, have decided you want. And then they can change that however they wish, right? So just to be clear on that, because some people think this manager just puts it out there, and they don't. There's a lot of dialogue behind the scenes, a lot of discussion going into it, and they should be living into what the vision of that elected body is to go in. So this here is on the roll. Few things, and I've kind of discussed a lot of this already, right? So they're going to work in partnership with elected officials. We have to, right? The manager is a professional administrator because of their knowledge, experience, and ability to do a job to help guide the policy. But we have to live into what it is that the vision and goal of the board has established. And that's really clear. It's not necessary in the mayor, but a village manager has to. They provide strategic planning and long-term support, right? So we have to be able to say, not just, hey, y'all just vote whatever you want, and I'll do the best I can. A good village manager is going to say, what's the long-range plan? They're going to help that elected body come through to make those decisions. They're going to engage the community to say, what are some things that you want, so that the elected officials can hear that. They're going to make sure that we know what is it that we're seeking, not just once every 4 years in an election, but every time these plans and processes come up, we need to have public hearings. We need to find ways to engage the community. We need to find ways that those voices can be heard so that good policy can be adopted, right? That's the role of a village manager in those. They have to ensure that staff at all levels have the knowledge, skill, and ability to do the job. Every department head, and then every department head is hiring people that know what they're doing in the job. Because again, that's what people expect. They want their government to deliver the programs and services that are promised to them to accomplish the vision that they had hoped to have for the village. And the last one is on that vision, the board's vision is all that matters. And I've said this every time I worked in local government. The board always makes the right decision, even if it's not one that I've represented. I offer a recommendation, but the right decision is one that the board makes because that's what they're elected to do, to serve the people, and they are the voice of the people in a representative government, that they're the ones who get to decide what government is, not us as professional staff members, right? And so professional staff members are not out there trying to circumvent the board, they're there to carry out the policies of the board, and that's an important distinction in that form of government. So a lot of this here on the value proposition I've talked to, the biggest thing is the quality of public service goes up. We also look at it as a long-term approach. That's what I talked about on the planning. Staff are led by executives committed to a codified set of ethical practices. We have a code of ethics in ICMA. That code of ethics is something we have to abide by. If we don't, people can file complaints. We have those complaints on that. If there is a violation of our code of ethics, they can be censured in that if you hire an ICMA certified manager, right? So there are codes of ethics. In those ethics, we do not engage directly in those matters that are before the board, right? So I wouldn't go out there as a city manager and say, you need to go out and show up at this budget meeting and tell the board not to adopt this initiative that they're moving, right? That would be wrong for a manager to do that. And if they're doing that, we'd have to have a conversation about that, right? And the board should hold them accountable. We don't get engaged in the politics of that. And so everything we do as professional administrators is to carry out the will of the board. That's something we are ethically obligated to do as managers. The other thing is we make sure that we build consensus among diverse interests, right? The people on the board, they represent different constituents often. And even though you all are voted at large, some are by districts or wards, even in at large, some have different constituents areas, some have different understandings of parts of the community than others. And sometimes people get deferred to because they know this community, that's where they live, for example. You'll see a lot of those issues come up. Those diverse interests need to be discussed and heard. And that's what the council manager allows for and requires. And then the quality of solutions are higher because the idea of nonpartisan policy. As a professional manager, I cannot be sitting here saying, well, here's the policy you ought to adopt so you can get more people voting for you on the board or mayor, right? We say this is what accomplishes it, this is what's most effective, this is what's proven to be effective, and that's what our recommendations are based on, right? And then there will be political understandings of the board in recommending that policy or not. There are times where it could be a great policy, but it's not going to work. The community is not going to have this, and we know that. And that's the job of the board to make that decision. We still have to offer the recommendation as professional staff. See, this is what we recommend. But it's for them to say, you know what, that's really not going to fly. How do we make this work? And that's the debate that the board has. And the last one is this idea of excellence around innovation, hiring, and development, right? So as we go through in the council manager forum to be effective, it requires us to make sure how do we get the best talent working for government to make sure government can deliver the programs and services we need to the people. So that's the idea behind council manager forum and why we support it. And here's the other thing. So it's all great in theory. And so there's a lot of research that gets done, right? And in the research that gets done, what I can tell you is there are several different research out there, academic, third-party research, that shows ways in which council manager form of government is better than mayor council. There's none that shows mayor council is better than council manager. At best, there's research that shows there won't be a difference in certain aspects. So as ICMA, for us to say what's the best form of government for good and equitable and efficient and effective government, council manager, there's research to support this. And again, if this research starts to show that it's different, we listen to that and say, okay, maybe this is starting to change. But we're not seeing that change. So here's things that are interesting that I find. One, municipal governments with a higher concentration of powers, which is the mayor council, concentration in one individual, tend to have more bureaucratized administration. Which most people think, wow, that's weird, right? Like, isn't council manager all the bureaucrats running everything? Well, no, because once you have mayor council and it's all in there, they can't do that job and do all the politics that they got to do as well. Like, you got to figure out what's the vision of the community. How do I get out in touch with the community? How do I engage? How do I do my constituent services? How do I get out there and do all that? That's like a full-time job in itself. Then you want to run a full-time job of the city and doing every program and services. So what do mayors generally do? They set up more committees, they set up more commissions, they set up more groups to have to go through because they got to delegate those services to different people. So what we find is that the more centralized you are, the more bureaucratized. So if you, and again, a lot of people will talk about this differently, but the research shows bureaucracies rise up stronger in mayor councils. And one way, I mean, you can probably, for here, just think of Chicago. Chicago's a mayor council city, right? Like, if that's the example you espouse to, that's an example you can see, right? So you laugh, maybe not. I'm not from here, right? But so we look at the mayor council city, that's the way Chicago runs. So if you want to see how is it, that's an example. Would you say it's less bureaucratic? Probably not, right? Would you say it's less corrupt? Probably not, right? Like, so you start to compare, like, that's sort of just something you can have. It's probably somewhere you could look at. Mayor council cities are less likely to implement cost-saving strategies when compared to municipalities with a council manager form of government, and that's on Aguado. And so what that is, we say, look, here's some cost savings we could have. The idea of implementing cost savings, if I'm a city manager, I better run a fiscally conservative city because, again, their job, holding the job, and if they get a job somewhere else, right, or they move up to another city or another place, or they get fired because a new council comes in and they want someone else, they better show they know how to run a good budget and a good government, right? When it comes to cost-saving strategies, cost savings as it's politically influenced, it depends which cost savings we're talking about, right? Because some constituent groups, we may not want to cut this program because I'm going to get a whole lot of people showing up at my office who aren't going to be happy, right? So even if it makes sense to do that cost savings, sometimes it will not make sense politically, right? So in council manager form, the advantage of the elected officials, and I've had this happen a lot, when elected officials really like this, they'd be like, yeah, I didn't have anything to do with that. You got to talk to the manager. I couldn't. Just look, they say I can't do anything in administration, so it's their fault, right? You'll see it. Sometimes they like that, right? Like they could be like, there's a barrier. But other times they get frustrated because then they get constituents coming up with this cost savings measure that the majority of the board agreed to, because any budget is a board initiative, not a manager initiative. They agreed to it. And then that frustrates some people. They just didn't want that cost savings. But you'll see more cost savings in council manager. Mayor council cities are more likely to offer an ineffective financial incentives for economic development opportunities, which are linked to declines in population and economic base when compared to financial incentives implemented in council manager cities. So I don't know if you have any of this. In economic development, the incentives that get offered to a business, right? Like, we're going to give you these tax breaks. We're going to put this amount of money if you locate your business here, if you add these number of jobs. These types of incentives in mayor council cities, they find that they're less effective for the long term because, again, many of those become more politicized, or it could be a business that this is someone I need to make sure keeps their business here, and they know the mayor type of structure. They have that authority to grant it that way. So we see when it comes to economic development incentives, while incentives in both forms of government happen, this research looked at which has greater effect on the economy and economic opportunities. Council manager incentives generally operate better than mayor council cities do. Council manager cities have stronger budgetary solvency compared with mayor council cities. So this budgetary solvency came in, Jimenez looks at and says, all right, what is our long range rainy day funds, right? How do we make sure that we're prepared in case an incident comes up? Council manager cities are more effective in that, and that also is found in their bond ratings. And you look at the research of what do in a bond rating. So if you want to lend money, you have your bond rating, AA plus, I think you guys are, right? It goes up to AAA. And so the better your bond rating, the less you have to spend to borrow money, right? And so if you have rainy day funds, they want to make sure you can still pay your bills, right? So that's the way that they look at it. So again, council manager performs better. Council manager governments have shown to be more likely than mayor council governments to utilize sophisticated revenue forecasting and expenditure analysis techniques, prepare multi-year budgets, emphasize strategic planning, long-term policy priorities, realize efficiency gains, lower per capita spending for basic services, and engage in other practices designed to promote long-term budget stability. And here's why. City managers have to do long-range planning, and they will guide every board through a long-range plan because they still may be in that position carrying out some plan that somebody else set before, and a new board priority comes in. We still got to finish what we started, so we better have a long-range plan so we have money now. Again, if I'm going to build a road, it may take me 5 years to get this whole thing finished. Well, the board's there for 4 years. Well, I still got to finish. I can't just leave a road half finished, so I need a long-range plan to know where we're going. And if you're going to adopt a budget and put on a plan to start building something, build a park, build a road, build a school, whatever they are, as we go through, we better have an idea that we can pay for that 5 years down the road. I got to adopt a tax rate today that doggone better pay for all these other things 5 years down the road. Otherwise, we're in a lot of trouble. We're going to always be debating a tax rate for something new that comes up. So managers in council manager cities, much more emphasis on long-range planning beyond a 4-year cycle, right? In mayor council cities, it is 4 years. I hope I get elected another 4 years. In most cities, there's 2 terms. And again, not all are. But if you look at those terms, it's a different focus of right here and now for the politics of it, which is why you see much more emphasis on long-range planning and strategic planning in council manager cities. Council manager governments are 57% less likely to have corruption convictions. 57%, that's a lot, right? And so the question is, why would that be? Well, the biggest part of that, and again, that's on Nelson and Afonso, so you can look at theirs from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So they looked at where their corruption convictions in government and which form of government did they happen to be, and they look and see that it's more likely in mayor council cities. And if you look at anything with fraud, anyone who's in any kind of fraud type of investigation in the finance industry, one of the things is just simply the opportunity, right? So you look at opportunity. If you have full power and full authority, both within the form of government of mayor council, and you don't have any real check on your power in there, and you hire your own people in every single department head, the opportunity is greater. Now, that's not to say mayor council cities are all corrupt and mayors are corrupt. It's not saying that. The reason it's more likely is there's greater opportunity for corruption to happen under that form of government. Again, ideally, and most mayor council cities don't have corruption either, right? So it's not to say, oh, if you're mayor council, you're just corrupt. No, it is to say it's a greater likelihood. So again, from an ICMA perspective, which gives us better government, which gives us a better chance to reduce corruption. We think we want less corruption in government. Study shows that lower corruption in council manager seems to make sense from our end, right? That's why we advocate for that. Council manager governments are more likely to make economic development decisions based on strategic plan guidance. So again, that kind of falls in line with what we talked about before. Economic development is based on strategic plan, not an immediate need for somebody, right? And that can be frustrating. Again, we talked about before this idea of effectiveness versus efficiency, right? I talked about that as one of the reasons people want to shift that, right? If I want to just, hey, this company wants to come here, I just need to sit down at the table with them and I'll work the deal. And that's what you'll see in strong mayor system. Just put me to the table, I can close a deal, I'm going to close the deal, I'll get that business here, right here today. It may not fit with any long-range plan, and they have anything to do with long-term strategy, but right now I got jobs and investment, that's a win. And again, that's totally fine, but we believe that long-range planning gives us better results long-term as opposed to immediate. Political influence of a mayor on the appointment of the chief administrative officer has a negative influence on the financial outcome of local government by Lee, Park, and Butler. So this is interesting, right? Because we see a lot of, and I think that's one of the things that y'all are considering here, if you end up choosing to do away with the form of government, then what you would end up, I think what has been proposed, if I understand correctly, is to still have a chief administrative officer, but just under a mayor, right? But this research was interesting from our end because of the negative influence on financial outcomes of local government. So whether it is council manager form or mayor council form, there are council manager forms where they say the mayor gets to choose and recommend to council who gets hired. And then they still report to the council as a council manager, right? So whether it's council manager form, mayor council form, if there is greater political influence by the mayor, the financial outcomes are worse, right? So we look at and say council manager where the whole council, the board, makes the decision, operates better than when there's undue political influence on who gets hired into that position. And again, a lot of that is because if it is somebody who sort of sounds good enough, they've run their own business, clearly they can run a government business, they're totally different, right? But sometimes that's what we hear, and that's who gets put. So if the mayor's like, hey, I know this person, they've run a multi-million-dollar company, they should come in here and run the government. And now, from a financial perspective, they don't really understand how federal government works, how state government works, how those fundings come in, how it can only be earmarked for certain things, what's fungible and what's not fungible, what are the things that I can spend money or not, what am I allowed to do as government or not. It gets really frustrating. As someone who ran a business and you go into government, it is very difficult to be like, you start banging your head against the wall, this should be a lot easier. But there's a lot of laws in place at the federal level and state level that we have to abide by, that you can't run government exactly like you run a private sector business. And so if you understand that, you start to understand why there might be differences in the financial outcomes of cities when there's undue political influence. Municipalities headed by a city manager are associated with increased bond ratings. I talked about bond ratings already. So Doug went and looked at where is the bond ratings higher, what form of government they are. Council manager form of government has better bond ratings. You have better bond ratings, you can build more capital projects because the cost of those capital projects are lower, which reduces your tax bill, right? It's that simple. Council manager cities tend to be equipped with more advanced information systems, which lead to improved efficiency over mayor council cities. And so when Kim did this research, what was interesting was they looked at IT infrastructure and technology infrastructure systems. And again, this long-range planning, this idea of effectiveness and efficiency. No one is going to want to spend millions of dollars on your IT infrastructure. That doesn't win you a lot of votes, generally, right? Like that's not the thing that people are excited to get out the vote for. And so when you look at council manager form of government, the job of the manager is to make sure this thing is run effectively and efficiently. We better have good systems in place so that the efficiencies are there, right, for the people to do the work, and also to make certain that when people come in and have the programs and services delivered, they're able to be delivered as they wish, particularly nowadays, right? We want to have it anywhere, anytime, any device I'm on, I want to access my, don't make me come to a counter and stand in line, right? Like those days are gone, right? So again, that idea in council manager cities, they're more equipped in that, which creates greater efficiency. I'm going to pause there for a second because I talked a lot, right? A whole lot, I know. Any questions or things that you sort of scratching your head right now being like, dude, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Yeah. If the mayor's in charge, do they have any checks and balances? So it depends how it gets structured, right? Generally, very little, right? The check and balances, if you look at what generally it is once every 4 years, it's the people to vote them in or out. And that's usually what you'll hear, right? Like if you look at what's going to be, if you have a mayor who's doing a bad job. Now, some states, and I don't know if you all do here, some states, they by referendum, or some cities by referendum can do a recall of the mayor if they want, but that has to be granted either by your charter or by your state to allow that. I'm not sure if Illinois has that, but generally, no. Generally, the mayor does their job as long as they don't do anything illegal. They don't have to be good at running the city. They don't have to be. Now, in 4 years' time, when there's an election, people may show up and be like, we're voting this person out, right? But no, there's no, in the mayor council form, the council, unless they were explicitly given rights, but under the trustee mayor form, they do not have that right to fire the mayor or recall the mayor or get rid of them. Or what? The most they can do is in the budget process, they can adopt a budget, and again, depending how that gets structured, but they can adopt policies and ordinances that can put some limitations, but at the end of the day, how well they deliver. The administration of government is delivering programs and services to the people and businesses. So if they're good at it or bad at it, that's for voters to decide in 4 years. That's usually the way that works. So if you're asking, is there a check on their ability of how well they do? The checks on their power, there's a separation. So as long as they're operating within their budget, they can do a good or a bad job. And there's not much that the board can do.
So in any business, you try to hire the best people possible. Putting myself in a position as a manager of a city. And I'm the best guy around. Okay. Look at both. How are we going to get a real good manager if we are not a manager council? Would a good city manager still want to get into a situation like we would have? You're being a manager, I think you can get an answer for that.
Yeah, so you'll get a different type of manager, right? And we have, and I can tell you from experience, we have managers who have been in council manager cities, have gone to mayor council cities, gone back to council manager city, right? Been all kinds. It's going to be what is the job opportunity that's available to them. When you say, do I have a good manager? And again, nothing for me is ever good or bad, better or worse in terms of a desired outcome. So you will have a manager under a mayor council system who's willing to allow the politics to help guide the administration. Someone who is uncomfortable with that to be like, look, I want to offer my professional recommendation and not be influenced by all the politics of it. You'll lose those people. So you have a smaller pool, but you'll still have professionals that come in and they operate and run in mayor council cities. But again, they're usually attached to that mayor. So what you have is you have far less continuity, right? So if the mayor hires me as a manager and then they don't win the next election, the next mayor is going to likely appoint the person they feel most comfortable in that position. So you're going to have turnover at the highest level and at the next level of all department heads. So you lose the continuity. And sometimes, so yes, you may still get good managers, like, it's still a good opportunity. It's a pay raise, it's a bigger community, it sets me up for the next opportunity. You'll get some of those folks there for sure. But one thing I like to say as someone who's sort of spent 16 years, came from economic development and then worked into the executive office, is the people who are on the front line, the people who are doing the day-to-day work. I mean, think about your own job. If your boss changed every 4 years with a whole new vision and strategy, there's no long-range plan, I got a whole new boss and a whole new way of doing things. How motivated are you to continue to stay in that job, work your butt off, that there's nowhere to move up to, right? If I can't ever become a director, the most I can hope to maybe be is an assistant director somewhere. And to get there, I've got to be somewhat politically aligned and affiliated, not just on the quality of my job. That's where it starts to negatively impact staff level. It is far more at that mid-management and below, because now my career path is totally different, right? In council manager cities, I'm going to go somewhere, if I'm interested in climbing a career ladder, I'm going to go somewhere where I can actually climb a career ladder to the top, right? If I just want to come in, just do my job, punch a clock and leave, that people can do anywhere. But those people that you really rely on, that you want to do great work, those are the ones that you lose that continuity under mayor council. That's what I see as the biggest difference in staffing. That's correct. And again, and let me be clear. Under mayor council, you can still have a mayor that chooses to want to do long-range planning and live to it. This is not required, right? Like that's the thing. Like, I want to make clear, this isn't doomed. Like, oh, this is great and sunshine and roads is over here and dark storm clouds over here. I'm not saying that at all, right? But yes, what we find in the research And what happens is there's no obligation for an elected mayor to have to live into these strategic plan guidelines. If you have a manager and the board says, we don't want to do long-range planning, strategic planning, don't want to do any of that crap, right? And there's cities that do, those managers usually end up, I need to find somewhere else because that is not good for me in the long term, right? So that's usually what you find. And it's that idea to really, how do we run effective government? So yes, if your bond rating were to go down, if your finances were not to be as strong, and having gone through a lot of these rating agencies, every time we let a bond, we'd have to go through. One of the things they look at is, do you have your rainy day fund? Have you paid all your bills on time? Do you have the capacity to build it? Do you have a long-range plan? Do you live into a 5-year budget cycle or a 1-year budget cycle? They look at all that, the bond rating agents. And if you don't have all that in place and you don't have the financial background there to make sure that's all there, yeah, they will downgrade you. Any other questions at this point? Yeah.
Is there anything to say that there has to be a manager?
Is there anything that says there has to be a manager put in place? No. Under the Illinois statute, if the current form of government, so I think you'd have to vote no, right? If you were to vote no, right? If you vote, it's just weirdly structured, right? Yes, you want to maintain it, right? Yeah, so you vote yes, I want to keep this form of government, right? If that were to lose, if the yes, I vote yes were to lose that vote, then you defer to what you were prior to becoming that, which is this village mayor, I think it's called. And in that form of government, by the Illinois Constitution, there is nothing in that that says you have a manager at all. Now, it doesn't mean that the mayor and the board can't choose to do that. And if they do that by resolution, that means the next mayor and board could choose not to do that, right? You do have a charter, and I'll get into some of that here. Again, your charter isn't being changed at all, right? You only have one clause in your charter that states that your manager form of government. That's it. And you have a whole lot that says what the roles and responsibility of the manager are, that they could adjust that by referendum, but you have to do a referendum to change your whole charter. So that's what's interesting, right? Like normally what we see is people change the charter. And if the board and mayor say, let's change our charter, and we want to change what the roles of the mayor, but manager are, as long as it's compliant with state code, they could have done that. And then people are voting, yes, this is what we want the manager to do. But if you do it by resolution, then that can also be undone by resolution as opposed to by referendum. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'll hit on that a little because I think I've got. So current situation, we just talked about that a little bit. Your village charter stipulates the authorities. I put a link on that, and I'll get them the presentation here that they can put out on Facebook or website or wherever. So that link is there. The mayor and board chose to advance the referendum by resolution to abandon the managerial form of government. And the primary reason that I saw in that resolution is that the mayor and trustees should be responsible for the principal final executive administration decisions of the village, right? And that comes back to what I talked about before as accountability. They want to have the final say, not the manager of the administration daily operations. That's what was stipulated in that resolution. So that's sort of where we are. And this is what's unique from my experience in the past 3 years working with ICMA on different forms of government challenges, is this is the first one where I've seen a call to abolish where there's not a clear alternative solution articulated on the ballot. So it makes it unique, right? Like generally they will say, we will abandon this in favor of this. So you kind of know what you're getting by resolution, or by referendum. This one does not. This one is silent on that. And I think they went through the state code, and the state code says it must substantially state this language that is used, but it only needed substantially. They could have been more clarity in that, but there's not. So the voters don't necessarily have exactly what that is, and I guess where some of the confusion seems to lie in some of what I've seen and some of the people I've talked to of what the heck are we changing to if this goes away. The other thing is that this one, and I've never seen this before, because generally they want to get rid of the manager position or sort of just focus more on the strong mayor focus. But this one, it was stated they want to create a village manager position along with delegated roles and responsibilities that will be virtually as they are currently. I've never seen that, right? So that's really interesting. Like Like they said, no, like this is what you're looking at is how do we keep it the same but be different, right? And so that's unique, yeah. So the question is, would this be the mayor's appointee? Correct. It would be the mayor's appointee. So the question was, would this just be a yes man? And so what I will say is, it would be the mayor's appointee, and how they run with the mayor. I mean, again, there are those in a mayor council where the manager is like, no, I'm going to offer my professional opinion, and this is what it is, and they're not a yes man. But it's not required within that structure, and they work for the mayor. The mayor could fire them if that's what the mayor wanted, right? And again, not suggesting that the mayor would want that, but there are some that that's what they want, and that's what's expected. And you kind of know that in the jobs that you do. So, yeah.
Could the mayor be the manager?
Could the mayor be the manager? Well, that would be, since it is by resolution, that would be a determination of the board and the mayor in that, because you have by resolution what it is. So what they would have to do is by resolution articulate what those credentials are. And so if they could stipulate if they're going to do, if they were to do by resolution that we're going to have an administrator, then the board in that policy discussion with the mayor could stipulate what that is. Or the mayor themselves, if it's not by resolution, and the mayor also has authority through the budget process, the mayor can add the position generally regardless of resolution, right? So a mayor says, you know what, I need to have a deputy finance director because we got so much going on in finance, and they put that into their budget and they put that to the board, and then the board votes on that budget, right? So there's lots of ways that you'll see mayor council bring in a city administrator. Sometimes it'll be a chief of staff. They'll have some sort of professional position to help guide and direct all the department heads. So could the mayor put in a budget that there's a manager and say, I am the manager and the mayor? I don't know that I've seen that anywhere. That seems kind of out there. But I don't know how that would play out. Yeah.
It diminishes the, it could potentially diminish the role or function of the board. Why would the current board vote for this?
Yeah, no, so you'd have to ask the board what their interests are. What I can tell you broadly, what we see when elected bodies support a shift to mayor council. Usually the reason for a shift to mayor council from elected officials, right? So one is there a problem that we're seeing that the current form of government isn't allowing us to address? So, you know, is there a houselessness issue? Is there crime or graffiti or things that are happening that, doggone it, this form of government just isn't where we need to? I haven't seen that as the reason or justifications here. And just driving through the community, there's nothing like it's a nice community, right? I drove from Chicago to here, it got nicer as I came out, right? Like, it's a nice community, right? So I don't know if there's those issues. You would know that better than I, what might motivate it. What we see politically is when you have a strong mayor, a mayor council form, which is what would happen if you were to change the form of government, is there is much greater political power in that mayor. Strong mayors can raise more money, and more people come out and vote for a strong mayor form of government for the mayor, because that one mayor can make all those decisions. And so when you have, and again, I don't know how your districts are drawn up, generally cities where if you look at your congressional district or your statewide maps, where they're voted by districts or areas, if there's cities that is a high concentration of population area that's there, you want to be a strong mayor politically because now you have a stronger vote turnout on those. And usually those types of elected officials often look for something beyond just the mayor position. They may be looking for a congressional seat, they may be looking for a state seat, something like that. Okay. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't. So you'll see that in cities often because as a political candidate, I need to get more political clout. So strong mayor, you're seen as running a city, running a state to become a senator, right? Like the governor do, like those kinds of arguments, you have a much stronger political case that you've run that versus the strength of a mayor in your current form is a mayor who knows how to build consensus, right? When a mayor can say, how do we get things done? Let me show that I can collaborate. Let me show that I can work across the aisle if it's a divided board. Let me show that I know how to build that. That's the type of mayor that does really well in council manager cities. Those that are like, this is the way it needs to be done. I want it done this way. This is what we got to do. And you don't know what the hell you're doing because I know how it needs to get done and I need to be seen as getting this done. Those do really well in mayor council cities because that's their job to run that city. Does that answer? I mean, okay, yeah.
I'm one of the people that voted for this.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Let me tell you why we voted for it. And I'd like to say, you know, one thing, this has been an excellent presentation that you're giving. I was afraid that it wouldn't be there yet. It's been a great job. I think people should pay attention.
Good.
You've given a lot of great things. I don't agree with that, but still gives you some insights that I still want to look into. But either way, you have to adapt it to what's going on. One of the things that you said was manager form of business would have, generally they do a better job at IT investment. When I got in there 4 years ago, it's night and day. We have put over $1 million in the IT department. It's been okay. Okay, well, it's just responding to why somebody would do that. And I'm just telling you that it is because of all the problems in the past.
Okay, well, no. To be fair, no, and then I appreciate. Look, I appreciate the comment, and I think one of the things, and what I would say is, and this is how good government and council manager forum works, right? You said you came in, and we say, geez, things aren't working well, and so I guess you're on the board then, right? So the board says, hey, things aren't working well. What'd you do over the past 4 years? Made it better. Said, hey, manager, you got to do this better. So what did the manager do? Well, from what you said, manager stepped up and did it better. And that's what's great about the council manager forum, we would argue, is that the board can say, here's a problem, it needs to be addressed. And if that manager didn't make it better, if the IT infrastructure isn't there and they didn't make it better, you all as a majority could say, we need a manager who knows how to do IT infrastructure. And we fire this person, we find one who knows how to do it. If the mayor, if they were a mayor, they could be like, I hear you, I don't care. Right? Like that's the distinction of how that, again, hopefully they wouldn't, but the ability to do that. Okay. Yeah.
Just looking at the power side of it. Just looking at the power side of it, the mayor is elected. That's a third of it, right? That's a third of the power. Now, as soon as he's elected, he's gonna look for his people and put them on the board. Now, he's got 2/3 of the power. That's right. Now, the manager gets in there, and if it's mayor, he'll put his own people in there. Now, he's got total control. That's right. Who's gonna stop it? Who's gonna balance it?
Yeah, so, and this is what's interesting, right? Like it's really interesting for you all, because you all, your board is elected at large, if I understand correctly. Is that right, everyone? So you're elected at large. In mayor council cities where everyone's elected at large, the idea of serving the electorate is even higher, right? Because who shows up and votes? The same people for the same offices. Mayor or board, if it's all at large, it's the same electorate voting all of that board, right? In some places they have by district, so at least there's some representative by different areas, so there's some different people voting. So the challenge is, and again, it's always from our end what gives us the best opportunity, right? So is there the potential, if we have a large voter turnout, and we know, I mean, anyone who's run campaigns or sit on campaigns, you know who's been voting, you know who comes to the ballots, you know where the mail ballots went to, we know where to spend the money on a campaign, and that's where it gets spent. Certain neighborhoods give more, certain people give more, certain people need to be heard more. That then creates access to a mayor in a mayor council city who's responsible for administration. So if I need to have my permit expedited, I'm a big time fundraiser, right? When we talk about corruption, that potential is there because now within the administration, there's a political consideration. Again, good mayors don't do that, but the potential is higher in that mayor-council form. The board also has been elected by the same people. So now the mayor, in terms of veto power, if they're serving the electorate, and this is what we always got to listen to, right? When you hear, a lot of times what you'll hear, and I think I've seen that a couple of times, but generally what you'll hear is the desire that the voters matter and the electorate matters. Like that's what the mayor council is on. And if you have everyone elected from that same electorate and the same voters, there is a huge amount of power by that voting bloc. Now, the manager, and if they bring in a professional manager, they're going to provide their professional guidance, but the mayor can fire them at any point. There's nothing to force that prevents that from happening. And those issues and initiatives that come through, it's really hard to get a supermajority because then you would have veto power of the mayor. So if the mayor, if a simple majority of the board goes against the mayor, remember they all had the same electorate, but for some reason there's this issue. They just need to keep enough to prevent a supermajority. They can veto it and still push their power forward. There's no check on that. And again, it makes sense at the federal level and even the state level because you've got rural and urban and suburban areas, and you got all kinds of things. At the local level, we're all in the same boat here, right? Like all the same program. So that's why that becomes a lot less effective at a local level. But the only thing stopping that is, again, in any form of government, it's the people that do good or do harm. And so we look at form of government not to say people and mayor council are bad. It's not. It's to say which one gives the better possibility, which one minimizes the risk. We're risk averse, right? We want to minimize risk in terms of how government operates. And that's really the distinction, I think. Yeah.
Has there been any research done about the effect of mayor council setups in the face of term limits? What happens when that mayor has that last 4-year period where they don't have to worry about reelection?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any research. I'll try to do some digging. I haven't seen anything on that. Any lame duck type of session, there's potential to try to finish things out, but there's always, they have to do it still within the budget and the process. I don't think there's anything that shows it is any more or less effective. I don't think they become nefarious. Haha, no one get rid of me now. I'm going to do that. I don't think that's, I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen any research to that either. Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this or maybe you can. Because this is listed as a referendum, what is the amount of votes that have to be passed? How many votes do they have to win? Is it a simple majority?
Yeah, 50.0001.
Is that a third for the referendum?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just by vote, is my understanding, by your state code. Yeah.
Do you think it's worded clearly so that people can understand it?
Well, I understand why it's worded the way it's worded. The state code, again, and I'll pull the language, I can get it to them, but the Illinois state code states if you want to abandon the managerial form of government, it will revert back to the previous one, and it says shall substantially state, here's what the language is. The board could have clarified that language for sure, because it states in there, even if you want to do another form of government, you're allowed to, by state code, say this and shall adopt it. They could have done that. They didn't, and again, why, there's a lot of reasons, right? They may not have had that fully fleshed out yet. They may say, hey, let's look at that. We want to do by resolution, so we'll have good, robust public debate to figure out what that next form is. Lots of reasons that can happen. Is it worded clearly? There's already question here. Oh, so wait, do I vote yes or no? Like a lot of people know what they want in terms of form of government, but they're not sure if it's yes or not. So if you want council manager form, which is what it currently is, you vote yes, right? If you want to change it to mayor council, you vote no, right? So the vote yes means, yes, we want to keep our current form of government. Is it clear is subjective. I would say to this room, it doesn't seem to have been clear. But that's sort of that. But and to be fair to the board, I think they took that clause out of the state code and said, well, we'll just use that because that's what the state code stipulates, I believe. Yeah. Someone have a hand? Okay.
I don't know how much they make a year, so I don't know if it's being considered a selling point on their part.
How much it would save?
Yeah.
I-
So, you know, they make, because you don't need to know that.
Yeah, the most I can argue in terms of cost is what the research shows is that better bond ratings, better financial management, better long-term strategies. In terms of actual cost, it's interesting here. I mean, I think I've got, I'll go through, I think I get to that in a little bit, so I'll hit on that. So this here, these are key questions to help you figure out, do you vote yes and keep it the same, or would you want to vote no and change it, right? So key question to consider, should the chief executive officer, whether that's the mayor or the manager, should the chief executive officer be of the city be accountable to the people of the village on a daily basis or to the electorate once every 4 years, right? If you believe they should be accountable to the people on a daily basis, you'd want to vote yes and maintain the council manager form. If you believe, nope, once every 4 years is where we'll hold them accountable, that's the mayor council form. That's when you can get them out of office if they're not doing a good job, right? Should the chief executive officer be required to abide by the will of the board of trustees, right? Under the council manager form of government, even if I disagree with what that board has adopted, I have to carry that out and be accountable to that. The mayor doesn't. They can veto that. If they don't agree with it, they can veto it, right? So if you believe that the mayor should be able to veto the action of the board, that only happens under the mayor council form. If you believe that the chief executive officer, if you kind of think about it as a business, right? So you got your board is going to of shareholders. They're the one that's your board here. That they're going to say, look, we need a CEO to run this business. I invested a lot of money in this business. I got a lot of stocks in this business. I want to make sure it runs well, so I keep getting better stocks in the private sector company, right? So what do? They hire a CEO. They don't randomly elect somebody, right? They hire a CEO, and then they hold that CEO accountable, right? That's kind of the way that the manager operates in there, in that sort of vein. And so that CEO, if that board shareholder says, we don't like what you're doing, you're running this company in the ground, you're not doing good, they're gone, they get a different CEO. That CEO can't be like, unless they happen to be a majority shareholder, right? But if they're not the majority shareholder CEO, they have to do what the board states, right? Regardless of what it is. And that's sort of the idea there as a key question that you might want to think of. The other one, should department heads be hired based on qualifications or political allegiance, right? Council manager form of government, they have to be hired based on qualifications. Mayor council, they can be hired by political allegiance. Don't have to, but they're able to under the mayor council. So if you believe, no, they should always be under, based on their qualifications, you'd want to vote yes and maintain the council manager form of government because that form of government requires that, right? Is running the village a full-time job or a part-time activity, right? So if you look at it, should the CEO, should their full-time job be running that city, nothing else? Is that what they should do on a full-time basis? Or is running the city something you do kind of part-time, get some other people to do the work for you, and you're there doing that while you do other things, right? Mayor council, there's no way any one person can run a city, a village the size of Orland Park, and be able to do all the constituent services that need to be done to truly know what the people are doing. Just can't. You'd be way too stretched thin, right? So we look at, what do you want? If you vote yes on the council manager form, you're guaranteeing that the manager, the CEO of the city, is there on a full-time basis to do that job. If you were to change it, that mayor is there. This is part of their greater work that they're already doing, right? So that'd be something else. So that kind of gets to this idea of where are you and how much hours, how much vested time can be in running that. Yeah, in the back.
I had a quick question about what immediate negative effects would we see in the mayor council form of government?
So what, it'd be speculative, right? Like all I can tell you is what I've already said. Here's the research we've done, right? Like every community needs to make the decision that's the best for the community. I'm coming here from Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. I'm going to go back home to D.C., Northern Virginia. You're going to go back home here, right? Like you all have to make the decision which gives me the best opportunity to have the village of the future that I want, which gives me the best quality of life that I want for myself and my family. That's what you have to decide. I'm here to be able to say, look, I can tell you if it's mayor council, then you will have separate powers. The mayor will be responsible for the daily administration of government, which means all program services, running of the permitting processes, all of that. They'll be in control of all, and they'll have power over all of that, and the board no longer will. You will have to go to the mayor for all the way that those programs and services are delivered, not to your board. Your board won't have any control over that, right? So that's the question that you have to ask. Which gives you the type of government you want? Do you want to go to the board, go to the public meeting? Do you want the mayor sitting in those public meetings and listening to you in those public meetings about every decision before the board, which includes the mayor? Or do you want them running the government and talking to the board and hoping that the board can influence the mayor? That's the distinction of the way that those structures operate. In terms of will it, again, it's not, this is great and this one's evil, this is good and bad. It's not what this is. It is to say, the reason ICMA supports it is what I've just gone through today. There are inherent benefits to the form of government that's baked into the way the form of government is, that gives accountability on a daily basis for the CEO, which is your village manager, to do the job they're hired to do. And your representatives, again, we're a representative democracy, your representatives to the board are there to hold that manager accountable. The power rests with the board, including the mayor, equal voices for you to be heard on every matter, administrative and legislative. And in doing that, you then can make sure, what are we doing? Are we having the programs and services delivered, right? And again, it's why I put it, the one thing that is really different here is it doesn't sound like the elected body or the mayor in the comments that I've seen have a problem with the management of government, right? They said, no offense to the current manager. Manager's doing a good job. Everything's good, right? Like, so everything's good, and we're going to hire the same exact position. It's going to be basically the same. What they're doing is separating the powers. That's the distinction that they're laying out. And again, the why, talk to your board members, right? What will be the impact? It may not change. It may be exactly the same. Could get better. Could get worse, right? Like, no one will know what that future is. But what you can control is which gives us the best opportunity. And that's the decision I would encourage you to look at, whichever way you vote. Those questions I put up are ones that are top of mind for me, because that's what I see the research showing why council manager generally performs better, right? And again, there's not research out there that shows mayor council performs better. Like, if I have that, I'd show that. And if y'all have it, send it to me, right? Like, it's just not there. At best, there's no harm. So I can't tell you what the future will be. I can tell you, based on the research, what speaks to you is what I would encourage you to vote. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we all give a round of applause? So, a few closing remarks, and then we'll let everyone go home before it starts to snow. So, again, we thank Jason, thank ICMA for coming out here and doing this on behalf of our community. The other thing I want to say, if you want to, we are here for Vote Yes Orland. This is why we scheduled this today. We will continue to put information out there. This information, Jason's PowerPoint presentation will be put on our website. So if you have friends and families who want to get this information, please refer them to our Vote Yes Orland website. We have signs. If you want to sign, you can get a sign. We'll deliver them to you. And we're also trying to raise money to get the word out. So we have a little QR code here. I was told I had to plug. If you could donate, even if it's $10, $20, please help us continue to get the word out to our neighbors. This is very important for the future of our community. And again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We are overwhelmed with the attendance. Thank you.
great.
Hey.
I'm the one who called you about getting graphics and everything.
Good, okay, good, good.